Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome members and officers to this Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting and welcome anybody watching online via North Arts District Council's YouTube channel. Before the meeting starts, I would like to invite the committee member and scrutiny officer to explain how proceedings will work and to undertake a roll call of those attending online to ensure that they can hear and be heard. James, please.
Thank you, Chair. So we'll just go through the roll call quickly. So tonight we're joined by Sarah Kingsley.
Present.
Thank you. Andrew Mills.
Present.
Brilliant. Thank you. And Rachel Cooper.
Present.
I think that's all the officers we're joined by. Are there any others in attendance? No. So just the procedure for tonight. So if a member wishes to speak, they should use the speak button located on the microphone unit. The microphone will light up green and the chair will be alerted of your request to speak. When the chair invites you to speak, your microphone will be made live and will turn red. The normal procedure rules in respect of debate and times to speak will apply. When requested to vote, voting will be via the yes, no, abstain buttons on your microphone unit. Details of how members voted will be shown on the screens around the room, and the result will be visible on the YouTube stream. In the event of a tied vote, the chair will have the casting vote. Are there any questions before we start the meeting? Great, back to you, Chair.
Thank you, James. Apologies for absence. Item 1, I have received apologies from Councillor Carol Stanier and Councillors Daniel Allen. Do I have any other apologies not already in advance? No. Okay, thank you. Item 2, the minutes of the 18th of January 2021. I'd like to propose that we take as read and approve as a true record the minutes of the meetings of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee held on the 18th of January 2021. Can I have a seconder for that, please? Thank you. I've got a choice. I'll go for the first one I saw, which was Councillor Strong. James, if you would like to go to the vote on that, please.
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you very much. Item 3, no notification of any other business. I have none. Item 4, Chair's announcements, and in accordance with the Council policy, this meeting is being audio recorded as well as filmed. The audio recording will be available on the NHDC website and the film recording via the NHDC YouTube channel. Members are reminded to make declarations of interest before an item. The detailed reminder about this and speaking rights is set out under Chair's announcements on the agenda. Item 5, public participation. There is none. Item 6, urgent general exception items. There are no urgent general exception items. And item 7, called-in items. There are no called-in items. So we go to item 8, annual report for the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Will, if you'd like to please.
Thank you, Chair. I've got no substantive updates to the report as written and attached. Members will note that it mirrors quite substantively the form and content of previous annual reports delivered to Council, being a quantitative overview of the work of this committee in the prior civic year. I'm bringing it to the committee tonight to seek any comment or guidance from the committee as to any additional items that you'd like included or any things that you think I've missed out. Do you members have any questions?
Thank you. Well, do I have any questions or comments from members? This is the draft, but it's a pretty final draft. There's a couple of bits to do. I've got to do an introduction and things. We would normally bring this back to the last council meeting of the year. However, as that is in March and it's actually next week, we won't have it done in time for then. So we intend to bring it as soon as possible in the new civic year, which is not unusual with what the situation we've had in the last couple of years where we've struggled a little bit. So that it will come to the next available full council meeting. If I have no comments on that one then. The recommendation is that the committee consider and comment on the annual report of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee 2021-2022 as attached to Appendix A prior to consideration by Council. Can I have a seconder for that, please? Thank you, Jim. Councillor McNally. And if we could move to the vote, please.
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you very much. We move on to item number 9, that the resolutions of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Just move to the report. Will?
Thank you, Chair. Once again, I'll be brief. I've got no updates to the report as written. I'm seeking approval from the committee to remove the 2 items that are marked as completed.
Thank you. Do I have any comments? Councillor Strong.
Yes, Chairman. Just picking up on the page 22, and this was the resolution around Harkness Court. It says in progress. I didn't think there was any more progress to make on that item.
Will, anything on comments on that? Because I think it came back to Cabinet or Council, didn't it, that one?
The recommendations of the committee were taken to Cabinet, and Cabinet gave an assurance that the issues had been considered. I've kept it as in progress in case members were minded to ask any further questions or to continue the item further. But if we are satisfied with Cabinet's answer, I'm happy to mark it as completed.
Okay. Is everybody happy with taking that off and calling it as a complete item? Yep. Thank you very much. Any other comments or questions on the work programme? No, thank you. Sorry, the resolutions. So the recommendation is to note the report with the removal of those items marked as complete, including that additional one there that we have on the Harkness Court. Can I have a seconder for that one, please? Councillor Strong. If we can move to the vote, please.
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you very much. Moving swiftly on to item 10, which is the Overview and Scrutiny Committee work programme. Will, again, please.
Thank you very much. Obviously, this is the final meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee for this civic year, so any items added to the work programme would be taken up with possibly a differently constituted committee in the next civic year, but we are still able to add items. I'm looking primarily at the yet to be scheduled column. I'm aware that we need to include an invitation to the local enterprise partnership, and there is also a standing item there for a report on the levelling up white paper, as it's now called, which I am intending to carry forward with the policy team. And I'm asking for input from the committee for any other items that you might like to consider.
Okay, thank you, Will. You do have as an appendix there the forward plan as a supplementary document. Just a moment while I get into it, because I know we have to dodge amongst different pages on ModGov. Right, most of the items that are on the forward plan at the moment are coming to Cabinet this month. I have a couple of suggestions. Oh, there was one item on there I wasn't sure about. I wonder if we got any further information. It's entitled First Homes.
Yes, if I can be of some assistance there. First Homes is an affordable housing scheme or an affordable housing product put forward as a new government policy, which the housing team are currently looking at. It's on the forward plan as its standalone item, but on review with the officer team, it's being brought to Cabinet next week as an item or a sort of set of paragraphs of recommendation in the strategic planning matters report, with a view to seeking Cabinet's approval to consider the First Homes policy in summer of next year. Okay,
thank you for that update on that. So that's quite helpful. Councillor Strong.
Yeah, according to the work programme that we have, there's the item on the commercial update.
Yes, we took we took it last month. That should have been off because it wasn't originally on last month, and we moved it. We brought it in last month.
Okay. Would have been nice to have had another one, but
any other items that anybody would like to see? Councillor Aspinall.
I think Councillor Strong's got a really good point, and I was unfortunately absent at the last meeting, so I wasn't. I didn't hear that, but obviously saw it in the minutes. But I think that given the current situation economically, and with all sorts of things going on in various committees where we're talking about finances as quite a severe strain, I think having a commercial update would be advisable for the forward plan to perhaps have slightly more regularity going forward. So I think it's a good point that Claire raises.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, Councillor Aspinall, and I think we'd like to see that be on every one next time round if we could possibly. And I'm just wondering if we could actually have a written update from the commercial director to members of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, please, arising from this meeting. The other one I was looking at as a possibility was the conservation areas one, which I know is quite a hot topic. But I see that again is coming to Cabinet this time. And the other thing I think would be worth us looking at in advance is the corporate equality strategy. So now we've discussed several items, as you know, that subject a couple of times before. So I think we'd like to see that probably for the June meeting. Okay, nothing else on there. Oh, Councillor Strong, sorry.
yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think maybe as a looking back, I mean, the council has been affected in a lot of ways. It's been working through the pandemic, and I think as a scrutiny committee, it might maybe just to look back and perhaps have a look at some of the things that we did well and build on them, particularly some of the partnership workings that we've done. I'm thinking about the mental health team, the food provisioning teams, just because some really good work seemed to go on with the council. And I think I'd hate to think as we go into and come out of the pandemic that some of those good things that we were doing, that we lose them just because we say, oh, it's pandemic, we don't do it anymore. But they're things that perhaps we should as a council can look at to see how we can continue with.
Yeah, that's a fairly sound suggestion. I do have something in the back of my mind that there is somebody somewhere doing a review on the joint working and as a sort of a summing up of what's gone on through the pandemic and that. But yeah, I think it might be a good idea to actually have something formal to Overview and Scrutiny Committee if nothing's coming else out to council or a review or anything like that. If you could stick that on, please, Will, as well. Okay, I have no, sorry, Councillor Aspinall.
It was just to build on that, really, just to say, I think there is there's recovery plan and there's a lot of work going into looking forward. And I think to build on what Councillor Strong is saying, that looking in the round at everything that's happened in the past 2 years, I think there's opportunity to not just look at what we can learn and change and take forward, but I also think there is a significant risk of losing some really good practice because it has gone on for such a long time. And I think that certainly the commercial update, you know, if we look back 2 years ago, this committee was really heavily focused on ensuring that we had good return on investment, that our commercial proposition was sound, and we appear to have really taken our eye off of that as a committee, which I think is the right thing to do through the pandemic. But I think that it would be a good, I think that's a really good, strong thing for this committee to be looking at, of just making sure we're not only having lessons learned, but that we aren't losing anything that was really important beforehand.
Yeah, and I think you're quite right there. Although without going into part two details from the last meeting, we did touch quite strongly on the commercial strategy and the outcomes of the commercial strategy. But yeah, it is something that we should now start refocus on again. But thank you for that. Okay, so the recommendations on that one, are to the committee can prioritize. The committee prioritises proposed topics for inclusion in the work programme, Appendix A, and where appropriate terms of high-level form and time of scrutiny input. We'll consider the forward plan, suggestive list of items, which I think you've got that, have you, Will? Now, thank you. And we, of course, note as usual that the Corporate Peer Challenge Action Plan extract, which again is something we'll need to start getting back to now things are returning to somewhere near normal, albeit the new normal. Can I have a proposal second for those recommendations, please? Councillor Strong to propose, Councillor Mike Hewson to second. Go to the vote, please.
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you very much. And we move on to item 11, third quarter monitoring report on key projects. Rachel.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the usual quarterly update on projects to support the council plan. Page 38.3 of the report has the status summary, which shows we've got 7 green projects, 4 amber and 2 which are complete. So the renovation of Howard Park play area and the refurbishment of the lifts at the Lairridge car park are now marked as complete, and these projects will therefore be removed from any future monitoring reports. No update on the local plan. All the information is showing on the council's website. And then 8.6, the preparation of a cycling and walking strategy. This project's moved to amber. It's taking a little longer than originally expected. HCC's consultants now expect to be issuing a draft for consultation end of March 22-ish, before final adoption by the HCC Highway and Transport Panel. So we are waiting for HCC to advise on the updated programme. So the full list of projects is included in Appendix A on page 35. But that was all I was going to draw your attention to if there are any questions.
Thank you, Rachel. Do you have any questions from members on this report? No. Thank you very much indeed, Rachel. So the recommendations on delivery against the key projects for 21-22 be noted and commented on. We've noted those. We've got those that will disappear from next time as the completed projects. So can I have a seconder for those recommendations, please? Thank you, Councillor McNally. If we can move to the vote, please.
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you very much indeed. Moving on to item 12, third quarter update and performance indicator. Rachel, again, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the third quarter monitoring report. So it shows data to the end of December. Page 47 shows the status summary. So we have 5 green, 3 ambers and 1 red indicator. All the other indicators are for information only and don't have targets set against them. Page 48, line 2, the sales ledger collection rates. So this is amber. Collection levels continue to be affected by COVID. However, we are showing an improving position on this time last year as we start to move back to normal recovery procedures. Page 49, line 4, percentage of NNDR collected in year. So this is currently showing as an amber indicator in December, but the latest figures for January have actually moved to green. So that, again, that's an improving indicator. Page 50, line 5, the short-term absence levels. This is our red indicator in this report. So absence levels were really low in 2020 due to the full-time home working. In 2021, the levels are starting to rise again with the Omicron variant, but also we've seen increases in absence from common infections, including colds and sickness bugs. Page 53, line 9, the number of households in temporary accommodation. This shows an improving position on this time last year, moving down from 120 to 94. Also, the HCLIP benchmarking data shows that North Herts continues to perform well against the other Hertfordshire authorities. And then page 54, line 14, the number of visits to the leisure centres, again, that continues to perform well against the recovery plan in place. So that was all I was going to draw your attention to there. If there are any questions, please.
Thank you, Rachel. Do I have any questions, please, on that one from any comments on anybody? Just a question from me, Rachel, on the sickness one. What sort of percentage of people have we got back in the building again now, working from the offices rather than working from home?
So we have a desk booking system in place, and people who wish to work in the office can now book those desks and go in. So we can pull some data to see how many are in use. I know leadership team are monitoring that, but I think most people still continue to work from home predominantly at the moment.
Yeah, and I don't think there's any pressure on people but to come back to work if they feel happier and safer working at home, is there, Rachel?
No, I think leadership team, they're currently consulting with staff on measures that they will continue to have in place in the council buildings. At the moment, they're still retaining the mask and the social distancing, and they're consulting with staff on how they feel about coming back into the building and what measure they would like to see.
Okay, and what are we doing with the, sorry, Councillor Aspinall.
Thank you. Just to build on that, I chaired the Joint Staff Consultative Committee, and we talked about this at length at our last meeting. There's a very relaxed approach to returning to the office, and we were really happy with how that was being managed through the leadership. I think members that are also here will agree with me on that. It was being managed in a very thoughtful way that was suiting everyone.
Thank you. That's good to hear. And what about the public contact side of things? We don't have the reception open yet, do we, as full-time thing again?
I believe at the moment it's by appointment only.
But members of the public can now come back in if they wish to make an appointment. Yeah,
I believe so. Yes.
Right. Thank you very much for that. So the recommendation on this one is the contents of the report be noted by the committee. There's no other recommendations that come up. So I can have a seconder for this one, please. Councillor Strong. And if we can move to the vote, please.
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you very much indeed. And moving on to item 13, performance management measures 22-2023. Rachel, again, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the report that is going to Cabinet, which sets out the projects, risks and performance indicators to be monitored by Overview and Scrutiny in 22-23. The report is also going to Finance, Audit and Risk Committee so that both committees have the opportunity to make recommendation to Cabinet. Page 60, section 8 of the report sets out how the council delivery plan was put together. This was compiled by the leadership team in consultation with the executive members and brings together all the elements of integrated performance management into one plan. The projects are either detailed in the council plan 22-27, or they are clearly linked to the council's plan priorities and themes. There will be other projects that are carried out that are linked to a statutory duty or support the delivery of council functions, but the council delivery plan focus is on those projects that contribute to the achievement of the council plan. The risks are those that could impact on the delivery of the council plan or the projects that are linked to that plan. And the performance indicators will tell us how well we are doing at achieving the priorities. As this is the first year of the integrated performance reporting, the approach may need to evolve during the year, and Overview and Scrutiny and Cabinet will be able to consider any changes as part of the quarterly monitoring reports. So page 65, Appendix A, this is the Council Delivery Plan, and it has the full list of all the projects, PIs and risks. The report is grouped into themes and linked back to the Council Plan. The first 3 columns on the report relate to the project. So it lists the description, milestones, due dates, and the linked council priority. The next 4 columns show the risks linked to that project. So there are bullet points on what the risk is and what the mitigating actions we can take to reduce the risk score. The risk scores are based on a matrix recording both likelihood and impact of the risk. So we have low risks, which are colour-coded green. These are scores 1 to 3. Medium risks are colour-coded in amber. They are scores 4 to 6. And high risks are colour-coded red, and these are anything scoring 7 to 9. We also include a target risk score, and this shows the outcome that officers expect can be obtained by putting the mitigating actions into place. So the last 2 columns on the report relate to performance indicators. So this is how we're able to measure the success of the project. So a target is in place where applicable. Some PIs won't take effect until the following year after the project has been completed. And for some projects, the success will be measured through achievement of the milestones themselves. So just to say, page 79, Appendix B. So the existing risk and performance indicator entries on Pentana, which is the Council's performance and risk software, have been cross-referenced to the Council Delivery Plan and matched where appropriate. So any entries which did not match will no longer be included in the committee reports, but will be monitored by service areas. So these are the items detailed in Appendix B. And then finally, just to say, the first monitoring report showing progress against the Council Delivery Plan will come to this committee in September. So that was all I was going to talk about there. Do I have any questions on that?
Thank you, Rachel. Comments, questions, please, from anybody? Okay. Councillor Strong.
Just a question. I'm not sure what page I'm on. It's on the town centres and the town centre strategies, and there's a due date of in April, but it says consultants appointed to prepare high street level centre recovery action plans for each town. What guidance have they been given to do that?
Sorry, this is the town centre recovery one.
Yeah.
So is that page 66?
69.
Oh, sorry, the town centre strategies. So the guidance, you want to know what guidance has been given to the consultants?
Yeah, who's actually looked at that and signed it off?
Okay, so that will be to do with the regulatory directorate. But I don't know the answer to that as to what information they've been given, but I can certainly find that out if that's something you wish to know. So I can take that one away.
If we could do that, please, that would be helpful. I think something else that's just come up from that question and answer there is actually something that you might be useful on this is actually which directorate is responsible for that particular performance in, for the targets and the performance as well. It would be, I think, quite useful to have that on there as a extra little bit in there somewhere.
Okay.
So I know, some of it does say to refer to the performance will be managed by the particular directorate. So it'd be nice to know which directorate it's actually been referred to. Councillor Strong.
Yeah, just coming back on that, because town centre strategists is something we've been talking a lot about and never actually seen them yet. It's sort of all tied up with the local plan as well, and that piece of work. So again, is this something that's been reported and signed off by Cabinet? Bringing in those consultants and the scope of work for them to be doing? We have a Cabinet member here, perhaps you might remember whether or not it's gone through there.
So, I'm so sorry. I've actually been incredibly distracted by the feedback that's coming through the microphones. It's really quite painful. It might only be me. Is it just me?
I will take a look, but I have limited control here. I'll do my
That's
best.
fine. Sorry, Claire. Councillor Strong, would you mind repeating yourself? That's okay.
No, that's fine. It's just, I mean, I always take a great interest in town centres and what's happening and strategies and pieces of work for them. And in this, it's talking about consultants appointed, and if the consultants have been appointed to do a piece of work, I'm just curious to know who signed off the piece of work, what was in the scope. Was that something that was reported to Cabinet? Have you as Cabinet members seen it and signed it off?
So obviously I can't speak on behalf of all Cabinet, although I'm a member, I'm not here as overview and scrutiny tonight.
I just wondered if you could remember whether it had actually, come to.
Not immediately coming to my mind. No, I'm really sorry.
That's right. I'm sure officers
Doesn't mean
dig it out, and perhaps it's something we could get a report back to the next scrutiny meeting to actually have a look and see what the work that's being commissioned is going to deliver.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Yeah, if you could have a look at that, please, and come back to us on it, Rachel, and see where it is. And
yeah, and just to say, obviously, the delivery plan has been put together in consultation with the executive members, so they are obviously aware of the project.
Thank you. Just one little comment in here. Oh, Councillor Hunter before I do that one.
Thank you, Chairman. Same page, in fact. I think I'd like to receive a bit of feedback on the replacement of the Royston Town Hall Annex, because I seem to remember it being reported some time ago that the party that was interested in the particular site was no longer interested because there was a highways issue. I thought it was dead and buried. I notice it's gone up to 5 on amber. I'm just wondering if that's going to come back in the red in the near future.
Yeah, a point taken on that one, and it did get covered at one point in the last overview and scrutiny committee meeting on the when we were talking about the commercial aspects. So, and I think it was a similar answer to what you just said. The Councillor Hunter came out there that the interest had fallen through. So, if we could have a look at that one, please. Okay, I've got no other comments or questions on it. The one I was going to come back to was these risks, of course, could actually go from amber to green to amber, or amber to red, couldn't they, as the project advances, so that they don't not necessarily always improve.
Yes, sorry, Chair, I should have mentioned that. So the projects are fixed. They are the projects that have been approved, and they will obviously be reported on. The risks are the current risks that have been identified, and the mitigations. But as the project commences and progresses, the risks may well change. So what will be reported on the monitoring reports will be the current position as at that point in time. So you'll be able to see whether the project risks have moved more towards the target risk score, or whether additional risks have been identified.
Yeah, thank you for that. And of course, that will also alter with should the project start to run behind and things, I would expect as well. Okay, thank you. I've got nobody else indicating to speak. So the recommendations are that Cabinet considers and formally approves the council delivery plan and any associated targets to monitor throughout 2022-2023 by the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. We have that little one about asking for a couple of some feedback on some of those items and adding a service directorate in. Can I have a proposal for that one, please? Councillor Strong and a seconder. Councillor McNally, thank you. Go to vote.
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you very much indeed. And moving on to the first of our more substantial items tonight, the shared waste service contract. Amy, do you want to present this or do you want Sarah to do it?
I was going to just present and let Sarah then do the more technical stuff because it's, well, only right. So anyway, thank you, Chair. So this report seeks to set the scene for the future of waste and street cleansing services across the partnership we have with East Herts Council. It covers 3 elements. Recommendation to support the new aim and principles of the shared service, ensuring the shared waste service has clear direction in managing services for the future. A recommendation to support a cross-party joint working group with East Herts Council to explore the strategic direction and design of the waste and street cleansing contract. And a recommendation to support a look at what alternative governance arrangements may be possible for the shared waste service. So we know that in the coming years, there will be significant legislative changes affecting waste management. It's prudent for us to ensure that our contract and our services fit for purpose for the future. Thank you. I'm now hand over to Sarah, if that's okay.
Thank you, Amy. Sarah?
Thank you, Chair. I've actually got nothing to add, but obviously happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Questions and comments, please. I got nothing coming up on this. Oh, Councillor Hunter.
Thank you, Chairman. Obviously, I can see the direction is to try and get a unified service between East Herts and ourselves, and putting in place a joint committee that will steer it in that direction. The only thing that occurs to me is that you're looking for a review on the contract in 25. So does that mean this joint service committee will be sitting around for 3 years talking about ways of doing it rather than actually implementing anything?
Sarah or Amy?
Yeah, I can answer. Just to clarify on the point about the joint waste committee versus the working group, at this stage, what we're actually looking for is just an in principle approval to consider options for the future governance of waste services. So with the joint waste committee idea being one of those options, we've not actually gone into the detail of how that would work just yet. And it's not anticipated that the joint waste committee would actually be set up now. It would be prior to the new contract start, but I imagine that it wouldn't be until quite near at the time. The element that we're trying to set up now is the joint working group with members of North Herts and East Herts councils, and that is to look at the sheds, the service design. So you'll see in the report, that there's quite a lot of differences between our services. For example, North Herts, we collect textiles and batteries. We take people's side waste recycling. At the minute, we also do the weekly food waste collections, and East Herts don't. And so the aim of the working groups is essentially to look at the different options for the future before we get to that stage where we look at the new contract.
Okay, but just on a question of timelines, then, when will the new contract specifications negotiations be starting?
Sorry. So it's quite a tight timeline, really. It's proposed, obviously, this report, the same report is going to East Herts, but their committee timelines are a little bit later than ours. So the timeline for the working group is to be set up, obviously, post-election, be carried out over the summer, then report be put forward to both cabinets, which I imagine will be later in the year. So probably, I want to say, I'm not sure it will hit the September cabinet. I imagine it'd be more like December cabinet. But obviously we've also got we've got to explore the options with ABASA as well, in terms of contract extension versus going out for new contract as well. So we have got a draft timeline of procurement, but it is quite tight, and that's why we're trying to get this initial phase done now. But essentially the report to cabinets on proposals for the service design will be this calendar year.
Okay, thanks. I might come back on that. Councillor Strong, you were waiting to speak.
Thank you, Chairman. I guess where I'm starting is in 8.9, and that's the consideration of the ability to align the services which differ significantly without significant additional capital costs. And that, having looked at some of the differences and knowing some of the legislation and knowing that we're trying to go to being a much greener council with wanting to sort of reduce emissions from any transport or freighters and everything, and the timing of all this, it seems there's a lot in here that seems just kind of be written down as though it's easy to do, and my gut feeling is that this is not an easy thing to do. This is quite a difficult thing, particularly if we want to do it with minimal capital costs. Also on 8.1, we have this shared service new aim, and I have to say I can't remember what the old aim was, so I'm not sure how significantly different this aim is from the old one, but again, it seems very well meaning as an aim, and the principles again seem very well meaning, all good things, but it's the doability of it all and the risk of being able to do it all as written down with minimal cost.
Thank you. Councillor Amy, Councillor Allen.
Just wanted to, should not underestimate our officers in this sense, especially Chloe and Sarah. I would like to pass that over to Sarah to come back to Councillor Strong's points. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I mean, one thing I would say is that we are very mindful of, as Councillor Strong said, some of these things are not easy decisions, which is why we found ourselves in a position at the beginning of the contract where we charged for garden waste and East Hartstone as the biggest decision, unilateral decision that was made. So at this stage, it's really about looking at the working groups and coming up with a business case for recommendation. So really, identifying what the best option is, but we're not, and obviously taking into account financial and environmental implications of those. But what I would say is that there may well be some options whereby we're not expecting everything to be fully aligned by day one of the new contract. It may be that there are some things that we transition towards greater alignment. So, and I suspect that there may well be some things where the council still want to do things slightly differently. We don't have to necessarily have 100% alignment, but I think the aim of moving towards greater alignment will ultimately put us in a better competitive position with potential bidders, because otherwise they're essentially bidding on two separate specs in what is in effect two separate contracts. In terms of the shared aim side of things, I suppose just to say that the original aims of the contract were purely financially driven, and I think the shared aims, the purpose of the shared aims now is really also to bring in that recognition of our climate objectives, and that actually our waste fleet in particular could make a substantial contribution to our net zero carbon targets.
Thank you, Sarah. You've actually picked a couple of points up there that I was hesitating to bring up earlier. In those of us who were part of the meetings on the original waste contract will remember we had joint meetings with East Hars District Council, and it did seem to get a bit of a rush at the very last minute with things. And it would, to me, I'm not sure if anybody will agree with me, it would seem like it would be a bit prudent to have the governance in place this time before we actually get into any negotiations, because I think that was part of the issues we had last time, was a lack of a common approach, or appearance of a lack of a common approach between the two councils. And I think it would be, which is what I was getting at about the timeline earlier, is will this be in place when we get into serious negotiations about what is required in the new contract and what the outcome of that contract will be?
Would you like me to answer that one?
Yeah, please, if you could, sir.
I suspect that as I said at the minute, the only commitment we are asking of Cabinet is to agree for us to look in principle at the Joint Waste Committee, because it wouldn't be, I think, by any stretch of the imagination, an easy thing to implement across both councils, given our existing committee structures and resources, etc. So I strongly doubt that a joint waste committee would be in place prior to us having to agree the service specification for the next contract. However, just to say that I think that's the whole point of doing the cross-party working groups, is that hopefully by doing that, we can agree between the two councils in advance almost with what our recommendations will be, have those conversations in advance so that we are more prepared, and present recommendations that are based on, as I said before, on a business case of why we feel that what these service options should be. So I'm hoping that will actually help strengthen the case before we get to Cabinet later in the year.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Aspinall, Kate.
Thank you. Yeah, I think this is really promising, and I'm really pleased to see that this is in front of us now. And I didn't think when I became a councillor I'd spend 4 years talking about bins, but it turns out that's what it's about. And so I'm saying that in order to kind of show that we shouldn't underestimate the importance of this service and the importance of what's in front of us. And I think that it will be a crucial part of kind of the what this council achieves. So I'm really pleased to see it. And I think that you're absolutely right when you say that this enables us to think about this contract and the management of this service in a much broader and holistic way, and not only about the commercial realities. And it enables us to look, therefore, commercially at things that don't just include finance, but also a wider picture, which I really support. The bit that I do just want to pick up, and I think is important for this committee to think about sort of recommending to Cabinet, is around 8.31 and 3.2, which talks about the scrutiny of the decision-making process. And I just to sort of throw my thoughts in there, I can see that a less formal alternative will always feel like a more sensible approach and a more common sense approach. But I actually think, because this is what we do seem to do an awful lot, and what is this is a really huge priority, that that by considering at the outset of this coming together what scrutiny would look like, and perhaps thinking quite sensibly now about making that the most formal way that we possibly could, with that delegated authority, which then means that it doesn't create inefficiencies. I think that would be the way forward, and for this committee to be recommending that to Cabinet.
Thank you, Kate. Councillor Hunter.
Thank you, Chairman. I've listened with interest. Yeah. If I was running a business and I waited 3 years to improve a contract, I'd be out of business. You've got two parties that are using one service provider. Now, you'd think the two parties would sit together and go through the problems that they got, the inefficiencies they've got, and the fact that the services don't comply with each other, because it's in both their best interest to get on board, and it's also in the best interest of the service provider. I don't quite see it myself, and this is probably where it comes down to the fact, as a council, we commit ourselves for such long periods of time, because if you've got something that's wrong, you go about fixing it. And we seem to be, with this document, preparing ourselves to fix it. Then we're going to get ready to fix it, but we won't be able to fix it before the period of time is up. And then we'll be going into another contract that won't be fixed, and we'll still be talking. And to me, that is not a way to conduct business. When you see that there's inefficiencies between the two services, you work it out and you talk to the service provider, because it's in their best interest as well. Because if the services marry up, they save money. Both councils save money. And here we are, we seem to be entering into a round of talking for a very long period of time till we get to a point where we can't do anything about it. But that's my view from the outside. And I'm not asking for a comment back. I'm quite happy to say that and be quiet.
Thank you, Councillor Hunter, for those comments, and I do have some sympathy with them. Councillor Strong.
Yeah, just one of the things, and I think it's probably just feeding off what Councillor Hunter said, particularly when you look in 7.13, and it describes this as a short summary of the list below, identify some examples of areas where the current services are not aligned, and it does say the word some in there. And I can think of one or two other areas where I know that the contracts aren't aligned, which I would have thought were quite significant, particularly like the working hours of the operatives in North Hertfordshire District Council versus those of East Herts. And I just wondered what the full list looked at like, because as Councillor Hunter says, if we're trying to align for efficiencies, we're perhaps, what else is out there that we're not aware of?
Yeah, thank you for those comments. And I think actually this is coming back to the reason for having the joint working group as soon as possible to feed into it. We have already identified those differences, the big major ones. We have got those. You could start not talking about them in 2-3 years' time, and it's too late to do anything with them again. We know what they were. We found out from the original one that we get some good bits from us on the things like the batteries and stuff like that we collect, and East Herts don't. And I don't think the original motivation was purely financial. It was the big motivation and the big reason for doing it. But a lot of the stuff was some of the reasons for going into the joint contract. So we could do things that we hadn't done before, like increased curbside collections and things like that. And the point of having a joint contract was to be able to pool the resources. And I think that's important, really, not to lose sight of that and to get this in as early as possible. So I think taking what Councillor Aspinall was saying about recommendation cabinet for scrutinising it and keeping an eye on what's going on with this, I think one of the other recommendations should be to set this up as soon as possible and get it going before we get into any detailed contract negotiations, not afterwards when it's too late, because we're going to be stuck with another contract or an extension to a contract that, again, we can't do nothing about for years and years and years. We've learned lessons from this as joint working partnership thing. We should apply those lessons before it goes any further. So I'd like to add 2 additional recommendations. One is that the cross-party working group is set up as soon as possible to look at the new contract, the ways of working, and to get a governance system in place for that contract and for that joint working, again, as soon as possible, and certainly with both before the contract signed this time. And again, regular reports, as Councillor Aspel suggests, and we keep that process and the contract negotiations under regular scrutiny and have regular reports back on where we are and how it's going. Councillor Aspinall.
Can I add to the recommendation that we specify what regular means? I think that the only way to ensure that people are satisfied that this is moving forward at pace is to ensure that we're looking at it with a high degree of frequency.
I think that should be probably. I think that probably should be updated at least every other meeting, and as we get further into the contract, every meeting. But at the initial stages, every other meeting. Councillor Allen, Amy.
Thank you, Chair. Just to point out that the merging of the services of two authorities that ultimately had a very different setup in the beginning is a huge task in itself. There are still some differences. There are some things have merged to become the same, like the charging of garden waste and such like that, although the amounts are different. East Herts weren't charging for garden waste before. There are other differences that are going to be leveled up, but the expectation of two different authorities in two very different areas to merge and run under a contract and it all line up perfectly from the beginning is just not going to happen. This is obviously going to be a bit of a pragmatic approach. You know, you keep practicing something, you find out that the bits you need to tweak it or change it or move on. So it's not going to be an instant thing. It's a huge task, and this has been a huge task, and it's a constant motion. It's not just going to be a done, tick box, move on. That's never how this works, and it's always changing in waste as well because everything else is changing. We've just gone through 2 years of everything being completely different because of the pandemic. Second thing, Sarah has a hand up.
Sarah.
Thank you. It was just actually on the point about not waiting until contract, that actually waiting until contract change is quite a long time to make some of these changes. And I think we totally appreciate that. And actually, as an outcome of some of the working groups, if we can come to an agreement on some further alignment of services, the idea is to try and get some of those where we can in place before the new contract starts, so that we're not essentially starting on day one of the contract with new services. And so if there's, you know, what we can do before the new contract starts, then we will with East Herts.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. I've got Kate, and I'll come back to that one. But I think one point that's coming out of this as well is that a joint working group and a governance group will not only, it's not about agreeing, it's also finding areas where there would be disagreement and where we couldn't have common working practice. And I think that's quite valuable to find out, particularly from the political side, where the two don't see eye to eye. And you can bring those into the negotiations much earlier rather than having them happen two totally different decisions on the same thing less than 24 hours apart in the case of the last contract. And it would have been quite helpful, I think, to have had that in advance beforehand. And I think setting these joint working groups up and that would actually help find areas where there's disagreement and where we may have potential issues and where we may want to work differently, which we always can, of course. Kate.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And just my final point on this is that I think that is as part of these principles, and I'm sorry, this might be written in, I might not have looked at the entire detail freshly, but I think one of the key issues that we had the last time round was that this committee didn't see the commercial arrangements, and that simply cannot happen again. And that needs to be written in.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think that's a case in point of exactly why you need the working party there. So we have those recommendations as written, plus the two additional recommendations. We can probably tweak the wording a little bit tighter after the meeting, but we have the principle behind it, which and I'm willing to put those two together. Do I have a seconder for these recommendations? Councillor Aspinall. If we could go to the vote, please.
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you very much indeed. Moving on to item 15, Green Space Management Strategy. Is it Andrew going to present this one? Or you're going to, Steve? Thank you.
Thank you. Does that go green at some point? It doesn't. Okay, so the green space management strategy is clearly about how we manage our green space. The clue's in the title. How we do that in order to make that space provide maximum benefit for the community and for the environment within the council's available resources. In terms of changes from the previous green space strategy, there's clearly a much increased emphasis on the environmental contribution that we expect the green space to make, both in terms of biodiversity and in terms of carbon sequestration, whilst continuing to provide a community facility for the people of the district. There are some significant changes also in the way in which play areas are to be managed and maintained. The previous strategy set out a program, a 5-year program of exactly what was going to be replaced when. This moves to a strategy where there is an annual assessment. The officers have a good view as to what the condition of play areas are, and there's a year-by-year assessment of where the money that is available to renovate play areas can most effectively be spent to deliver the best results, rather than trying to estimate that 5 years out. There are also some significant changes in terms of the way in which we plan to deal with potential new green space. Clearly, the local plan will, should it one day be completed, raises the potential for there being significant amounts of new green space in new developments. And we recognise that the management of that is going to be a significant issue for the people who live in those developments. Our position as set out in the strategy is that so long as they make an appropriate contribution towards the community facility and the developers are prepared to provide sufficient funding to enable the council to maintain them, that the council should be willing to undertake the maintenance of those. I think we're all aware of locations across the district where those sort of arrangements weren't made in the past, and there are bits of communal green space which management is profoundly unsatisfactory. They don't get managed. The residents blame the council, even though it's not actually the council's responsibility. And that's clearly something we want to try and avoid in the future. So setting up an arrangement to manage new green spaces is an important part of the strategy. The strategy very much doesn't stand alone. It has a significant relationship with the climate change strategy, with the emerging local plan, with the biodiversity strategy, with the green space infrastructure plan, which comes back to the creation of new green space. And it doesn't attempt to include all the details on areas like allotments and cemeteries, where there will have to be some more detailed documents, daughter documents put in place to cover some of those. There was an extensive piece of public consultation. We got a large number of responses. Some of them didn't actually relate to things in the green space strategy. People told us quite a lot about what they thought about the green belt. Personally, I agree with most of what they told us, but it's not actually relevant to the green space strategy. And they raised the issues which we, to be honest, expected they would. Particularly in the summer, there have been some challenges in terms of persuading people not to litter our parks and green spaces. And it's been a real challenge to keep that under control. And we recognise that, and there have been campaigns to try and deal with that. I'm sure that they will need to continue, and we will have to continue to clear up as best we can, and try and persuade residents that actually, if the bin's full in the park, they should take their rubbish home with them, rather than leaving it next to the bin. So we got a lot of feedback there, but we've got a strategy that I think will enable us to deliver green spaces across the district, and that covers everything from Norton Common down to small play areas. Enable us to manage those in a way that will provide a good facility for the community that people can use and enjoy, and at the same time make a contribution towards the council's environmental objectives, and to do that within the resources, the limited resources that we have available at our disposal. So I think that's probably all I wanted to say. I don't know if Sarah or Andrew want to add any more to that.
Thanks, Steve. Sarah, Andrew, anything to add? Andrew?
No, nothing from me. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah?
Not for me, thanks.
Okay, thanks for that, Steve. Questions from members and comments, please. Councillor Hunter.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a small point on the recommendations. I assume on 2.1, my report says adopt the visions, objectives and aims for managing green spaces detailed in 7.5. On my report, it's 7.4, unless there's a 7.5 I haven't got. I just thought I'd mention it. And I'd also like to say that I'm really pleased that this idea of actually looking at things on an annual basis than rather compiling a hit list for 5 years, because things change and things need to be replaced, need to be improved, and it being reviewed by the service director on a regular basis is a much better way forward. And I do note also the increase in budget, which is also a good thing. So thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Tony. And there was some good stuff in there as well. And Steve made a particularly good point about new developments and the green space that the developers provide. And we've seen it all too often in the past where a developer makes a planning application look wonderful because they're putting this new park and new play area and all this stuff in place. And then we get to the point where nobody's paying for it and the gates remain locked or the thing falls into disuse. As Councillor Jarvis said, we get the blame for it, but it ain't our fault, mate. And it's good to see that. And the local plan does cover that a bit, making sure that they are maintaining perpetuity. And some of the recent planning decisions we have taken have added that as conditions as well. I think it's important we ensure that that continues to happen as well. So yeah, I'm quite pleased with this. There's quite a good summary on page, I can't read, I think it's 114, where the little graphic on there with the green space management strategy, what it feeds into it, what feeds out of it is quite a good summary of how it all works. It is important to remember this is an overall strategy. Things change, as Councillor Hunter said and Councillor Jarvis has said, and I believe this allows for that to happen. Councillor Strong.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I did read in the comments about one of the play areas, which obviously was the parish council that would look after that particular play area and the equipment that is in, rather than it being something that was aligned to the district council. But the thing I actually wanted to ask about, and again, for this particular strategy and looking after our green spaces, in particular the Howard Gardens in Letchworth, I believe, because I'm aware that there's a petition that's going out there about the park ranger and that service, which has been removed or withdrawn. I just wondered if there was I could get some background understanding why that was done, particularly when we're talking about safer communities. And that particular ranger, as I understand it, was providing, I think, to those that were using the park some sort of security, and that person is now no longer there. And there is this petition in which I see that, just checked it, 1,137 people have now signed.
Yeah, if you could answer it, Steve, or Andrew, refer to Andrew.
This is not part of the green space management strategy. The decision to remove the ranger from the Howard Gardens was taken last summer. But it's clearly taken some time to implement. And I think, if I think back to my youth, every park had a number of park keepers. I remember as a small boy running away from them. I expect other people remember doing that as well. The way we manage parks has had to change. They're now managed by a group of people who turn up in a truck with their equipment and do the work in a particular part, and they move on to the next one. the situation at Howard Gardens was a little different from all our other parks in that, as part of the Heritage Lottery grant that was used to renovate the park, I think about 12 years ago, there was a requirement that we had a ranger for a period of at least 10 years. The ranger's job did involve some maintenance, and I think he made a valuable contribution, and the person who did the job, I think, formed a really good relationship with users of the park. But the presence of a ranger is not central to the management of the park or to the security of it. None of our other parks or open spaces have one. There isn't one in Bancroft in Hitchin. There isn't one in Avenue Park in Royston, or Priory Gardens in where did I say Avenue Park was? Avenue Park's in Baldock, isn't it? Priory Gardens in Royston, or the Great Ashby District Park. Most of the issues we have with antisocial behaviour in parks are in the evenings and overnight at a time when the ranger isn't present. And we're also quite clear that the staff who deal with maintenance of our parks are not there to deal with security issues. They're not there to confront people who are behaving in antisocial ways. That's a job for which the police need to get involved. So given the very substantial constraints on the council's resources, it simply wasn't feasible to go on providing an extra level of input into Howard Gardens. We can manage the gardens perfectly satisfactorily in the way in which we manage all our other parks. And in terms of the engagement with the community, there are other ways in which we can go about doing that as well. So, it's a regrettable decision in some respects, but I'm afraid given the pressures on local government funding, park rangers are something that we've never been able to afford in most of our parks, and I'm afraid we can't afford in Howard Gardens anymore. But I don't believe that the public will see any difference in terms of the way that the gardens are maintained or managed.
Thanks for that, Steve. One little point you raised towards the end there was about the extras that the ranger does there, and I know he does help with educational programs with the schools and things like bat walks and stuff like that, because I've taken part in one of those myself. Was that part of the requirements of the lottery thing, or is that something the ranger did off his own bat as a extra?
I'm afraid the honest answer to that is I don't know, but Andrew Mills made it.
Andrew, do you want to come in on that one?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, there was an element of audience development and that within the criteria for the park rangers post, but one of the key roles was the interaction with the public. But that actually did move on to other sites, and Tony, the park ranger, was actually spending some time on Norton Common to deliver some of that, and that was really sort of Tony, or the ranger, following his personal interests and aspirations. The presence or loss of the park ranger isn't going to mean that the Friends of group is going to demise, and it will mean that there will be probably a closer contact now between those organisations involved with Howard Gardens with officers than what there has been in before. So Tony has taken on some of the issues directly himself on his own volition, and has extended his job role far beyond the job description in some instances.
Yeah, thanks for that, Andrew. And it is rather sad to think that we'd lose somebody who's actually willing to put a lot of his own time and effort into it. Because I do know personally what he does, as I walk through that park almost every day, and it will be a bit of a loss for a lot of people in the town. I think we need to look a little bit at if there's anything we can do with that. I fully understand the budget restraints and the reasons for doing it, everything. But we are losing what's actually quite a valuable resource in the chap who does that down there. Any other comments or questions on that one, please? Nope. Okay. So the recommendation is to adopt the vision, objectives and aims of managing green spaces detailed and 7.4 below. Review and adopt the green space management strategy 22 to 27 at Appendix A. Agree the delegation for creating an action plan arising from a green space management strategy and the annual review of the action plan to the green space manager in a consultation with the executive member for environment, leisure and the service director place. With no other recommendations, can I ask for a seconder for that, please? Councillor Mike Hewson was in first on that one. And to move to the vote, please.
Chair, that motion's carried.
Thank you. That brings an end to our business. I'd just like to make one little comment. At the end of the last meeting, we did pick up on the point about reports referring to North Hertfordshire District Council as a legal entity, not North Hertfordshire Council, because we may get ourselves into some difficulty by making formal decisions with the wrong name in there. And I think it was agreed that the reports would refer to North Hertfordshire District Council and recommendations. That I noticed at least 2 of them tonight didn't in some places. So if we could just make sure that happens. Councillor Strong.
Yeah, as you've brought it up, particularly on the item 14, there's NHC, there's NHDC, and I think these are public documents. I think we were assured that NHC would not be in public documents because that's confusing with North Hertfordshire College. So I see both those being in the report. So I just think that's perhaps one for you, Edward. So William Edwards, sorry, I get confused when you've got a Christian name for a surname. Mr. Edwards, then. Sorry about that.
Okay, that concludes our meeting for tonight. Thank you, everybody. This is the last meeting of the civic year. Thank you, everybody, all your members, for your participation and everything, your contributions this year. Thank you to the officers throughout the year who've done all the reports and everything. And see you all next year. Or we may see each other next year. Who